The moment the front door clicked shut, my entire world fell apart. I was standing in my sister Vanessa's living room, watching the taxi disappear down the street in Madison, Wisconsin, when I turned back toward my 8-year-old niece. Ivy, the child everyone believed had been mute since birth, wasn't reaching for her tablet or typing a message. She was staring straight at me. Then she opened her mouth and spoke for the first time in her life. "Aunt Emma," she said calmly, "don't drink the tea Mom made. She's planning something bad." In that instant, I realized the silence, the diagnosis, and even my sister's love were all part of a lie that had been carefully built for years. And if I took a single sip, I might not live long enough to uncover the truth. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there in my sister Vanessa's kitchen, the thermos still warm in my hands, staring at Ivy like the floor had dropped out from under me. For a split second, I wondered if I'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, some strange auditory hallucination. But Ivy was still looking at me, her eyes steady, her mouth closed now, as if she hadn't just shattered 5 years of silence with a single sentence. "Ivy," my voice came out thin, "Sweetheart, what did you say?" She swallowed and glanced toward the hallway, the way a kid does when they're afraid someone might be listening. Then she looked back at me and repeated it, slower this time, each word careful and deliberate. "Don't drink the tea Mom made. She planned something bad." The thermos suddenly felt heavier, like it was filled with concrete instead of herbal tea. I set it down on the counter as gently as if it might explode. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. I dropped to my knees so I was eye level with her. "You can talk?" Ivy nodded, a small, quick motion. "Yes." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Since when?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Since always." The room tilted. For a moment, I thought I might pass out right there on the kitchen tiles. Ivy, my quiet, observant niece who communicated through nods, gestures, and a tablet, had just spoken in a clear, confident voice. No slur, no hesitation, no struggle. Nothing like the neurological condition Vanessa had explained to everyone so many times I could recite it by heart. "I need you to tell me everything," I said softly. "But first, are you safe right now?" She nodded again. "Mom and Dad are gone." As if on cue, the silence of the house pressed in around us. Vanessa and Luke were supposed to be on a 5-day anniversary trip. Sun, beaches, cocktails with tiny umbrellas. That's what Vanessa had said with a smile too bright to feel natural. That's why I was here, in Madison, babysitting. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Let's sit down." We moved to the living room couch. Ivy tucked her feet underneath herself, hands folded in her lap like she was bracing for something important. I noticed details I'd never questioned before, how alert she was, how carefully she watched my face, how she seemed to measure every reaction. "Why did you say not to drink the tea?" I asked. Her fingers tightened. "Because she said it would make you very sick." The words landed hard. "Who said that?" "Mom," Ivy replied. "She was talking to Dad in the kitchen last night." A cold wave rolled through me. "What exactly did you hear?" Ivy took a breath, then another, like she was gathering courage she'd been storing for years. "She said you'd be too sick to think, too tired to stop anything, and that by the time you felt better, everything would already belong to her." Everything. My mind raced. Our mother's trust, the paperwork, the shared signatures required for major withdrawals. Vanessa had complained about it more than once, always disguised as jokes. I had never taken her seriously. "Ivy," I said carefully, "why are you telling me this now?" Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Because she said today was the day, and because I don't want you to get hurt." Something cracked open in my chest. "Why didn't you tell anyone before?" She looked down. When she spoke, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because when I was little, she told me if I ever talked, something bad would happen to you." The words stole the air from my lungs. "She said my voice was dangerous," Ivy continued, "that every word I said could hurt you, so I stopped." 5 years. 5 years of silence, not because she couldn't speak, but because she was protecting me. I reached for her without thinking, pulling her into my arms. She was small and solid and shaking, like she'd been holding herself together through sheer will. "You did nothing wrong," I whispered. "Do you hear me? Nothing." She nodded against my shoulder. I glanced back toward the kitchen. The thermos sat there, innocent looking, yellow lid catching the light. For the first time since walking into the house, something other than fear settled in my chest. Focus. Vanessa thought she had 5 days. She thought I was alone, unsuspecting, and obedient as always. She was wrong. And this time, I wasn't going to smile and say thank you. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this space grow and brings you more quiet stories like this. Thank you for listening. I didn't touch the thermos again. I didn't even look at it for a while. Instead, I sat there on the couch with Ivy tucked against my side, her head resting lightly on my shoulder, like she was afraid that if she moved too much, everything she'd just confessed might disappear. "Can you tell me more about what you heard?" I asked gently. She nodded, then paused. "Will I be in trouble?" The question broke something in me. "No," I said immediately. "You will never be in trouble for telling the truth. Ever." That seemed to steady her. She took a slow breath and began, her words careful but clear. "They were in the kitchen last night. Mom thought I was asleep. Dad was nervous. He kept asking if it was safe." Ivy's mouth tightened. "Mom said it wasn't dangerous, just enough to put you in the hospital." She laughed a little when she said that. I closed my eyes for a second. Vanessa's laugh. I knew it well. Light, dismissive, always used when she wanted something to sound harmless. "She said once you were sick," Ivy continued, "they'd drive to Milwaukee instead of the airport. There's a lawyer there who doesn't know you. She said she practiced your signature a lot." That did it. My stomach dropped hard. "When did she say all this?" I asked. "Last night. And this morning before they left." Ivy hesitated. "That's why she made the tea right before they went. She told you it was for stress." Of course she did. Vanessa had always wrapped control in concern. I suddenly saw 100 small moments in a new light. The way she insisted on handling things for me. The subtle comments about how I worked too much, how I worried too much, how I needed help making decisions. I looked down at Ivy. "Sweetheart, you said you've always been able to talk." She nodded. "Then why did everyone think? Why did the doctors think?" "She told me not to talk to them," Ivy said softly. "She said I should just nod or point. She said if I talked, they'd make me go somewhere bad, somewhere without you." My hands curled into fists. Vanessa hadn't just silenced her. She'd isolated her. "Did anyone ever hurt you?" I asked, choosing my words carefully. Ivy shook her head. "Not like hitting, but she grabbed my arms once. When I asked about what she said on the phone, she scared me. That was enough, more than enough." I stood up slowly. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, you're staying with me at all times. You don't answer the door for anyone. You don't drink or eat anything I don't give you. Understand?" She nodded again, eyes wide but trusting. "Second," I continued, "we're not telling your mom that you can talk. Not yet." "Why?" she asked. "Because we need her to think everything is going exactly the way she planned." Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen. "Like the tea?" "Yes," I said quietly, "exactly like that." I walked back to the counter and stared at the thermos. My hands were steady now. Whatever was in there, it wasn't meant to kill me, but it was meant to stop me. That mattered. I pulled a clean glass from the cabinet, poured the tea down the sink, and rinsed the thermos thoroughly. Then I filled it with plain water and set it back where it had been. "Emma?" Ivy asked. I met her gaze. I need her to believe I drank it. Her mouth formed a small O. "Are you going to pretend to be sick?" "Yes." She considered that, then nodded seriously. "Okay, I can help." I almost smiled. The first call I made wasn't to the police. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed someone I trusted completely. Rachel Moore answered on the second ring. "Emma, what's wrong?" "Rachel," I said, keeping my voice low, "I need you to come over. Now. And I need you to bring gloves." There was a pause. "Are you safe?" "Yes," I said, "but I won't be if I wait." She didn't ask another question. "I'm on my way." While we waited, Ivy showed me something else. She led me down the hallway to Vanessa's home office, a room I'd always been told was off limits because of important paperwork. Ivy walked straight to the desk drawer with the keypad. "What's the code?" I asked. 0315, she said, their anniversary. The drawer clicked open. Inside were folders, neat, labeled, terrifying. I flipped through forged authorization forms, bank statements with withdrawals just under reporting limits, and printed emails referencing a meeting in Milwaukee. Every piece fit together with awful precision. By the time Rachel knocked on the door 40 minutes later, my fear had hardened into something sharp and controlled. Vanessa thought she was the smartest person in the room. She had forgotten one thing. She had trained her daughter to be silent. And in that silence, Ivy had learned everything. Rachel stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes moving from my face to Ivy, then to the stack of papers spread across the dining table. I could see her mind working, the way it always did when something didn't add up. "Start from the beginning," she said quietly. So I did. I told her about the tea, about Ivy's warning, about the drawer, about the emails, the forged signatures, the plan to make me sick enough to disappear for a few days while Vanessa cleaned out the trust. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression growing tighter with every sentence. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "Okay," she said, "first things first, the tea." She pulled on gloves, lifted the thermos, and carefully poured a small amount into a sealed container she'd brought with her. "I know someone at the lab," she added. "I'll get this tested tonight." Ivy watched her with intense focus. "It won't kill her," she said suddenly. "Mom said she's not stupid enough for that." Rachel's eyes flicked to me. "That tracks," she murmured. "Incapacitation, not murder." Hearing it said out loud made my stomach twist. "What about the papers?" Rachel asked. "I've taken photos of everything," I said. "Dates, amounts, signatures. There's a pattern." She nodded. "Good. This isn't impulsive. This is planned, which means we do this carefully." I glanced at Ivy. "There's one more thing." Rachel followed my gaze. "She talked," I said. "She's always been able to." Rachel's face softened as she crouched in front of Ivy. "You're very brave," she said gently. Ivy shrugged, but there was pride there too. Rachel straightened. "Emma, you need a lawyer, and not just any lawyer." "I know," I said. "There's someone." "Daniel Brooks." We'd gone to college together. He'd gone into prosecution. We hadn't spoken in years, but there was no one I trusted more to tell me the truth without sugarcoating it. He answered after 3 rings. "Emma Caldwell," he said. "This is unexpected." "Daniel," I said, "I need help, and I need you to listen carefully." By the time I finished explaining, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "This is serious," he said finally. "Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. And what she did to that child—" His voice hardened. "That's abuse." "What do I do?" I asked. "You let me handle the legal side," he said. "I'll coordinate with local authorities, but here's the key part. You cannot tip her off." I looked at the thermos on the counter. "She thinks I drank the tea." "Good," Daniel said. "Then you lean into that. You act sick, weak, confused. You let her believe she's winning." My stomach nodded. "How long?" "Until she walks into a room thinking she's about to take everything from you," he replied, "and finds out she's been caught instead." After we hung up, the house felt too quiet again. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. "I'll stay as long as you need," she said, "but you need to start the performance soon." I nodded. "She'll expect to hear from me." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Vanessa. I stared at the screen for a second too long before answering. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice to tremble. "Vanessa, something's wrong." "What do you mean?" Her tone snapped into concern so fast it almost impressed me. "I've been sick since this morning," I whispered. "Dizzy, throwing up. I think I need to go to the hospital." A pause, too measured. "Oh no," she said. "That's awful." "I'm so sorry," I added. "I know you're on your trip. I didn't want to bother you." Another pause. "Is Ivy okay?" "She's fine," I said quickly. "Mrs. Klein next door said she could help if I have to go in." "That's good," Vanessa said. "Get some rest. Drink water." I almost laughed. "I'll text you updates," I said. "Do that," she replied. "Feel better." The call ended. Rachel exhaled sharply. "She didn't ask which hospital." "No," I said. "She didn't." I looked at Ivy. She was watching me closely. "You did great," she said quietly. "So did you," I replied. That night, Rachel left after the lab confirmed what Ivy already knew. The tea was laced with a sedative and a powerful laxative, enough to hospitalize me for days, enough to make me helpless. I sent Vanessa a text before bed. "Still so sick. Can barely stand. Might go to the ER in the morning." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. "Rest. Don't worry about anything here." I set the phone down. Vanessa believed the plan was working. She had no idea that every step she was taking was leading her exactly where we wanted her. The next 2 days became an exercise in patience and precision. I stayed inside Vanessa's house, curtains half drawn, lights dimmed, phone always within reach. Every few hours, I sent carefully worded updates, weak, apologetic, just convincing enough. Still nauseous. "Doctor thinks it's food poisoning. They're keeping me overnight." None of it was true, but every message was bait, and Vanessa swallowed it whole. She never called. She texted. Short, polite, emotionally hollow. No questions about Ivy, no rush to come home, no panic, just enough concern to keep up appearances. Rachel checked in constantly, rotating with Daniel's instructions coming through in clipped professional bursts. Milwaukee was confirmed. The lawyer Vanessa planned to meet had already been contacted. Cooperative, unsettled, relieved to learn he wasn't the mastermind of a crime. Day 4, Daniel told me over the phone. That's when she moves. Day 4 arrived gray and quiet. I woke before dawn, heart pounding, Ivy already sitting upright on the couch beside me. She hadn't slept much. Neither had I. "Is today the day?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but you're safe. Remember that." She nodded, gripping my hand. By mid-morning, Daniel sent the final message. "They're in position." Rachel arrived with coffee I didn't drink and a tablet she set on the dining table. "You ready?" she asked. I took a breath, as I'll ever be. The video feed flickered to life. A lobby in Milwaukee. Clean. Modern. Vanessa walked in first, dressed perfectly. Neutral colors, professional posture, hair smooth and controlled. Luke followed a step behind, shoulders tight, eyes darting. He looked exactly like a man who knew he was standing on the edge of something irreversible. They checked in, smiled, waited. Ivy leaned closer to the screen, silent. Vanessa was led down a hallway and into a conference room. She didn't notice the cameras. She didn't notice the extra people at the table until it was too late. I watched the moment realization hit her. The fractional pause. The flicker behind her eyes. Then the mask slid back into place. "Good morning," she said brightly. The detective spoke first, calm, polite, relentless. Names were confirmed, relationships clarified. Then the documents were placed side by side. Forged signature, real signature. Vanessa leaned back, crossed her legs. "My sister's handwriting has always been inconsistent," she said smoothly. "She's not well." I felt Ivy stiffen beside me. The detective didn't raise his voice. "We've already spoken with her employer and physician." Another document, another silence. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Luke's breathing went shallow. "And this," the detective continued, "is the lab analysis of the beverage you prepared before leaving town." The room shifted. Vanessa didn't speak. The final piece played without warning. Ivy's voice filled the room, steady, clear, impossible to deny. When it ended, Vanessa stood abruptly. "That's not possible," she snapped. "She can't talk." The detective's reply was quiet. "She can. She always could." The handcuffs went on less than a minute later. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel relief. I felt something unclench inside my chest that I hadn't known was locked so tight. Rachel muted the tablet. "It's done," she said softly. Ivy let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for years. The days that followed blurred together. Statements, paperwork, court dates that felt unreal in their fluorescent-lit mundanity. Luke cooperated immediately, signed everything, avoided my eyes when we passed in the hallway. The judge didn't hesitate. Emergency custody, granted. When we walked out of the courthouse, Ivy squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "She can't make me be quiet anymore," she said. "No," I replied. "She can't." That night, we didn't go back to Vanessa's house. We went home. My apartment was small, cluttered, imperfect, and safe. Ivy explored every corner like she was mapping a new world. She chose the spare room without hesitation. "Purple," she announced. "The walls should be purple." I smiled. "Purple it is." Later, over takeout eaten straight from the cartons, Ivy talked about everything: dinosaurs, school, books she'd memorized because listening was all she'd been allowed to do. Her voice stumbled sometimes, caught on emotions she didn't yet have words for, but it didn't disappear. I listened. That was all she'd ever wanted. Outside, the city settled into night. Somewhere far away, Vanessa was facing consequences she could no longer manipulate her way out of. Inside, a child who had once gone silent to protect me was finally speaking freely. And for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to believe that we were going to be okay. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic echoes, no sweeping music, just fluorescent lights, wooden benches worn smooth by years of quiet endings, and a judge who looked like he'd seen every version of broken family there was. I sat at the front table in a blazer I usually saved for important meetings. Today felt bigger than any client, any deadline. Ivy sat beside me, feet dangling above the floor, hands folded tight in her lap. She'd chosen her outfit herself, a simple dress, her favorite color, purple. She leaned toward me. "I'm nervous," she whispered. "So am I said honestly, "but we'll do this together." When the judge entered, the room stood. Ivy stood too, copying me without hesitation. She was watching everything, always had. The judge reviewed the file slowly. Fraud, forgery, financial abuse, psychological coercion of a minor, attempted poisoning. Each word landed heavy, final. Luke's signed statement was read into the record, his cooperation, his surrender of parental rights, his quiet admission that he'd known and done nothing. Ivy's grip tightened around my hand. Then the judge looked directly at her. "Miss Ivy Caldwell," he said gently, "I understand you've recently begun speaking again after a long time." She nodded. Her chin lifted a fraction. "That took courage," he continued. "And today, I want to hear from you. In your own words, where would you like to live?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Ivy looked at me, really looked at me. Then she stood. She was small, 8 years old, barely tall enough to see over the table, but her voice didn't shake. "I want to live with my Aunt Emma," she said. "She listened to me even when I couldn't talk. She never made me feel broken, and she makes really good pancakes." There was a soft ripple of laughter. Even the judge smiled. "Very well," he said, tapping his pen once. "Emergency custody is granted to Emma Caldwell." I didn't realize I was crying until Ivy hugged me and whispered, "We did it." Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter. Ivy talked the entire walk to the car, about the judge, the echo in the hallway, how serious everyone looked. I listened. Every word a small miracle. That night, our apartment became something new. We pushed the spare bed against the wall, sketched plans for shelves and a reading corner. Ivy insisted on lining her books up by dinosaur era, not author. I didn't argue. "Can I tell you something?" she asked as we brushed our teeth side by side. "Always," I said. "I used to practice talking in my head," she admitted, "so I wouldn't forget how." My chest tightened. "You don't have to practice anymore." She smiled at her reflection. "I know." Therapy started the following week. Some days were easy. Some days Ivy went quiet again. Not silent, but cautious, like the past was tapping on her shoulder. We learned to let those days pass without fear. Healing wasn't a straight line. Vanessa took a plea deal. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to see her mask fall again. The trust was audited. Most of the stolen money was recovered. I became sole trustee, not just for myself, but for Ivy's future. I sold the old family house. Too many echoes there. I put part of the money into an education fund in Ivy's name and kept the rest exactly where it belonged. Untouched, planned, safe. Some mornings, I'd wake to the sound of Ivy talking to herself in her room, narrating stories, rehearsing conversations she no longer had to hide. It was the best sound I'd ever heard. One Saturday, we ate breakfast on the balcony. Pancakes, orange juice, early sunlight warming the concrete. Ivy launched into a story about a dream involving a penguin who drove a car, a castle made of waffles, and a very polite dragon named Gerald. It made no sense. It was perfect. Halfway through, she stopped and looked at me. "Aunt Emma." "Yes, sweetheart." "Thank you for listening, for real listening, even when I was quiet." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You never stopped being heard." She nodded, satisfied, and went right back to her story. As the morning light crept higher, I thought about silence, how it had been used as a weapon, and how it had almost cost us everything. And I thought about voices, especially small ones, and how powerful they can be when someone finally believes them. Some families are born, others are chosen. Ours began the moment a child broke her silence to save my life, and in doing so, gave us both a future worth listening to. Life didn't magically become perfect after the court ruling. It became quieter in a different way. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the air is still and you're not sure yet which pieces of your life are solid and which ones might still shift under your feet. I learned quickly that healing wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary. Slow mornings, repeated routines, showing up again and again. Ivy started school 2 weeks later. The first morning, she stood in the doorway with her backpack clutched tight, eyes scanning the hallway like it might disappear if she stepped too far in. I knelt in front of her and adjusted the strap. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," I reminded her. "You never owe anyone your voice." She nodded. Then, after a pause, she said, "But I want to." That was new. Wanting to speak, not because she had to warn someone or protect them, but because she simply wanted to be heard. When I picked her up that afternoon, she ran toward me like she'd been doing it her whole life. "I made a friend," she announced breathlessly. "Her name is Lila, and she talks a lot, but she listens too." I smiled. "That's a good kind of friend." At night, Ivy talked herself to sleep sometimes. Soft stories drifting through the wall, dinosaurs negotiating peace treaties, brave girls rescuing lost adults, houses where no one ever had to whisper. I lay awake listening, letting myself finally believe that the danger was behind us. There were still hard moments. A certain song on the radio would make her freeze. A raised voice in a store could send her spiraling inward, silent again for hours. On those days, I didn't push. I sat with her. I listened with my whole body, the way you do when words aren't the important part. "You're safe," I'd say. "I'm here." And slowly she'd come back. One evening, months later, Ivy found a box while we were unpacking the last of the storage bins. Old photos, family gatherings, holidays that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. She picked up a picture of my mother, smiling at the camera, sharp-eyed even then. "Grandma knew," Ivy said suddenly. I looked at her. "Knew what?" "That something was wrong," she replied. She never said it out loud, but she always watched Mom, like she was waiting. I nodded. I'd come to believe the same thing. That night, after Ivy went to bed, I stood on the balcony alone and let myself grieve properly for the first time. Not just for my mother, but for the version of my sister I thought I had, for the family I believed in, for the years Ivy spent silent because adults chose convenience over truth. Grief and relief sat side by side in my chest, and that was okay. Spring came quietly. Purple walls replaced beige ones. Ivy's bookshelf doubled in size. Therapy sessions turned from survival to curiosity. One afternoon, Ivy asked if we could get a dog. Someday, not now, just someday. "We'll see," I said. She grinned. "That means yes later." One Saturday morning, nearly a year after everything fell apart, Ivy helped me make pancakes. She stood on a chair, flour on her nose, narrating every step like she was hosting a cooking show. "And now," she announced, "the most important part. Don't rush or you ruin everything." I laughed. "That might be the best advice I've ever heard." She grew thoughtful. "I used to think being quiet made me safe," she said, "but now I think being honest does." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something settle into place. "You were never weak," I told her. "You were brave long before anyone noticed." She shrugged, embarrassed, then smiled. That night, after the dishes were done and the lights dimmed, Ivy curled up beside me on the couch. "Aunt Emma," Yes. Do you think some people stay quiet because they're waiting for someone they trust? Yes, I said without hesitation. I think that happens a lot. She leaned against me, content. I'm glad I waited for you. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing, the quiet certainty of a life no longer ruled by fear. The truth was, Ivy hadn't just found her voice. She'd taught me how to listen. And in doing so, she turned a house full of lies into a home built on something far stronger: trust, patience, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be loud to be real. Some stories don't end when justice is served. They begin when the silence finally feels safe enough to break. Time has a way of revealing what really lasts. A year after everything unraveled, our life no longer felt like something we were holding together with careful hands. It felt lived in, real. Ivy had grown taller, louder, more confident in the quiet way that comes from knowing you are safe, even when no one is watching. She talked all the time now, not just at home, but at school, with friends, with strangers who smiled politely and had no idea how hard-won her voice was. Sometimes I caught myself pausing in doorways just to listen, her laughter drifting down the hall, her opinions delivered with absolute certainty. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, Ivy asked, "Do you ever miss her?" I knew exactly who she meant. I dried my hands slowly. "I miss who I thought she was," I said, "not who she chose to be." Ivy nodded, like that answer fit into a place she'd already prepared for it. "She doesn't scare me anymore," she said. That mattered more than anything else. Vanessa's name came up less and less. The case had faded from the news, folded into court records and sealed agreements. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if she ever thought about the moment Ivy spoke, if it haunted her the way silence once haunted this house. I stopped wondering eventually. Some people don't deserve space in your future. Spring turned into summer. Ivy learned to ride a bike, skidding across the pavement, laughing when she fell, trusting that scraped knees were survivable things. We celebrated small victories, report cards, therapy milestones, the day she volunteered to read out loud in class without being asked. She didn't even hesitate, her teacher told me. She just raised her hand. I sat in my car afterward and cried. That night, Ivy found me on the balcony staring at the city lights. Was it a happy cry or a sad one, she asked. Both, I admitted. She seemed satisfied with that. One afternoon, as we were sorting through old papers to shred, Ivy found a photocopy of one of the forged signatures. She studied it carefully. "That doesn't look like you," she said. "No," I agreed. "It never did." She tilted her head. "Why do you think she thought she could get away with it?" I considered the question. Because she was used to people not looking closely, not listening closely. Ivy smiled just a little. She picked the wrong house for that. She was right. Listening had become our quiet superpower. On the anniversary of the day Ivy spoke, we didn't mark it with anything dramatic. No speeches, no tears, just pancakes in the morning and a long walk through the park in the afternoon. Leaves crunched under our feet, the air sharp and clean. Halfway through the walk, Ivy stopped and looked up at me. "Do you think I would have talked if it wasn't you?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think you would have eventually. You're strong." She thought about that. "I think I talked because I knew you'd believe me." My chest tightened. "I always will." That night, as she got ready for bed, Ivy paused in the doorway. "Aunt Emma?" "Yes?" "If something ever feels wrong again, I won't stay quiet." I smiled. "Good." After she went to sleep, I sat alone in the living room, the apartment humming softly around me. I thought about how close everything had come to ending before it ever truly began. How a child's voice, ignored by so many, had changed the course of both our lives. Silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's full of waiting. And when the right person listens, when the space is finally safe enough, that silence can turn into the most powerful truth there is. Our life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was honest. And that was enough. I turned off the lights and went to bed, carrying with me the certainty that whatever came next, we would face it the same way we always had, together, listening and unafraid to speak. The letter arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. No return address, plain white envelope, my name typed neatly, no flourish. For a long moment, I stared at it from the kitchen counter while Ivy did her homework at the table, humming softly to herself. Ordinary moments like that still felt precious, fragile in the way good things often do. I didn't open it right away. I waited until Ivy went to bed. Inside was a single page, Vanessa's handwriting. It wasn't dramatic. No apologies wrapped in excuses. No declarations of love. Just a few tightly controlled paragraphs written the way she'd always spoken, measured, precise, convinced of its own reasonableness. She said prison was sobering. She said she'd had time to think. She said she never intended for things to go that far. She didn't say Ivy's name. That omission told me everything. At the end, she wrote that she hoped someday we could talk like sisters again. She underlined the word talk, as if it were a gift she was offering. I folded the letter once, then again, and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. Some conversations don't deserve to happen. The next morning, Ivy noticed something was off. "You're quiet," she said over breakfast. I smiled, just thinking. Good thinking or bad thinking? "Finish thinking," I replied. She nodded, satisfied. A few weeks later, Ivy had her first school presentation. 5 minutes on any topic she wanted. She chose dinosaurs, of course, but not battles this time. Adaptation. Survival. How creatures changed when the world changed around them. I sat in the back of the classroom, hands clasped tight, heart pounding like it was my turn to speak. Ivy stood at the front, poster board shaking just a little. Then she took a breath and began. Clear, confident, curious. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Ivy froze for half a second, startled, then smiled so brightly it felt like the sun had moved indoors. On the drive home, she was quiet again. Not the old quiet, a thoughtful one. "I used to think being loud was dangerous," she said finally. "Now I think being invisible is." "That's very wise," I told her. She grinned. "I learned from experience." Summer came back around, warm and lazy. We adopted a dog in June, a mutt with oversized ears and a tendency to sit directly on your feet. Ivy named him Echo, because he always comes back, she explained. At night, the three of us would pile onto the couch, Echo snoring, Ivy reading aloud, her voice steady and strong. Sometimes she stumbled over words. Sometimes she laughed and started again. I never corrected her unless she asked. Listening was still the point. One evening, as we watched the sun set from the balcony, Ivy leaned against me. "Do you think Mom ever listens to herself?" The question surprised me. "I don't know," I said carefully, "but some people only hear what they want." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I'm glad I didn't turn out like that." "So am I said. The truth was, Ivy had choices now. Choices she'd never been allowed before. She could speak or stay silent. Trust or pull back. Love without fear. That was the real victory. On the anniversary of the day she broke her silence, Ivy asked if we could do something special. Not big, just meaningful. We went to the library. She walked straight to the children's section and checked out a stack of books. Stories about brave kids, found families, voices that mattered. At the checkout desk, the librarian smiled at Ivy. "You read a lot," she said. "I talk a lot too," Ivy replied proudly. On the walk home, Ivy slipped her hand into mine. "Thank you for not making me talk when I wasn't ready," she said, "and for believing me when I was." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for trusting me with your voice." That night, as Ivy fell asleep, Echo curled at the foot of her bed. I stood in the doorway a little longer than usual, listening to the steady rhythm of a life no longer shaped by fear. Some stories end with justice. Ours ended with something quieter and far more powerful. A child who learned that her voice mattered. An adult who learned that listening can save lives. And a home where silence was no longer a weapon, but simply the space between words, safe, gentle, and finally at peace. The first time Ivy asked about her name in the court records, I hesitated. We were sitting on the floor of her room, surrounded by books and puzzle pieces, Echo asleep with his head on her foot. Ivy had been helping me sort old documents into folders, school forms, medical notes, the boring, necessary paper trail of a stable life. She held up a page and frowned. "Why does it say minor child instead of my name?" That's how they protect kids' privacy, I explained, so strangers don't know everything about you. She considered that. I like that, she said, but I also like my name. I smiled. Both can be true. A few weeks later, Ivy wrote her first letter all by herself. Not to Vanessa, not to anyone from the past. She wrote it to her future self. She sealed it carefully, wrote the date on the front, and handed it to me. Can you keep it safe? I will, I promised. She didn't tell me what it said, and I didn't ask. Trust, I'd learned, didn't need proof. School brought new challenges, group projects, classroom debates, the messy, wonderful chaos of other kids with opinions just as loud as hers. Some days Ivy came home energized. Other days she came home quiet again, retreating inward not from fear, but from overstimulation. On those days we made soup, or puzzles, or sat side by side reading without speaking. Silence, when chosen, felt different. It felt like rest. One afternoon, Ivy came home with a flyer for a school assembly on speaking up. She frowned at it. They make it sound like talking is always the answer, she said. What do you think? I asked. I think listening should be on the poster too. So she added it. Crayons. Big letters. Listening is speaking too. Her teacher later sent me a photo of the poster taped to the classroom wall. I saved it. In October, Ivy had a nightmare for the first time in months. She came into my room without a word and climbed into bed beside me, shaking. It's okay, I whispered. You're here. I know, she said, but my body forgot. We stayed like that until her breathing slowed. Trauma, the therapist had said, didn't always knock. Sometimes it slipped in quietly. The important thing was knowing it didn't get to stay. The next morning, Ivy made pancakes without being asked. They were misshapen and slightly burnt. She served them proudly. For being brave, she said. For who? I asked. She shrugged. Both of us. Winter came early that year. Snow piled against the balcony door, the city muffled and bright. Ivy pressed her forehead to the glass and said, It's quiet out there. Yes, I said, but not lonely. She smiled. In December, we went to a small holiday gathering with friends. Rachel, Daniel, people who knew pieces of our story without ever asking for more than we wanted to give. Ivy moved through the room easily, laughing, choosing when to speak and when to observe. Rachel leaned toward me at one point. She's remarkable, she said softly. So are kids, I replied, when they're believed. Later that night, Ivy and I walked home under string lights strung between buildings. She kicked at the snowbanks, boots crunching. Do you think people change? She asked. Some do, I said. Some don't. She nodded. I think I changed. I stopped walking and looked at her. You didn't change, I said. You grew. That felt right to her. I could tell. On New Year's Eve, Ivy stayed up past midnight for the first time. We watched fireworks from the balcony, echo barking at every explosion. When the clock struck 12, Ivy closed her eyes. What did you wish for? I asked. She thought about it. For quiet to never be scary again. I wrapped an arm around her. I think that wish already came true. As the year turned, I realized something had shifted inside me too. I no longer listened for danger in every silence. I no longer scanned rooms for the subtle signs of manipulation I'd once missed. I listened for joy, for laughter drifting from Ivy's room, for the soft thump of Echo's tail against the couch, for the ordinary sounds of a life no longer built on lies. Some stories don't end with a final lesson. They keep unfolding gently day by day. And every time Ivy chose to speak, or chose not to, I knew we were still writing ours. The first time Ivy spoke up for someone else, I wasn't there to see it. I heard about it later, from her teacher, during a routine parent meeting that was supposed to be about grades and reading levels. We sat across from each other at a small table, papers neatly stacked, sunlight slanting through the blinds. She's doing very well academically, her teacher said, but there's something else I wanted to share. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, old instincts. There's a new student in her class, she continued. Very quiet, doesn't talk much. Yesterday, another child made a comment about it. Before I could step in, Ivy did. My breath caught. What did she say? She said, sometimes people are quiet because they're thinking, and sometimes because they're scared. Either way, we don't make fun of it. The words settled over me like a soft weight. She didn't raise her voice, the teacher added. She wasn't angry, she was calm, matter of fact. The other kids listened. When I told Ivy about it that evening, she shrugged like it was no big deal. He looked like I used to feel, she said. So I said something. I sat down beside her. That took courage. She tilted her head. It didn't feel scary, it felt right. That was when I understood something important. Ivy wasn't defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by what she chose to do next. Winter faded slowly into spring. The city softened. People lingered longer outside. Ivy grew an inch overnight, it seemed, her sleeves suddenly too short, her opinions growing just as fast. One Saturday afternoon, we went through old boxes together, things I'd kept without really knowing why. At the bottom of one box, Ivy found the envelope she'd given me months ago. My letter, she said, surprised. Did you keep it? Of course, I replied. Do you want it back? She thought for a moment. Not yet, but maybe soon. She placed it back carefully, like a promise waiting for the right moment. That evening, as we cooked dinner, Ivy asked, "Do you think our story is over?" I smiled. I don't think stories like ours ever really end. She stirred the pot thoughtfully. Good, I like that. Later, after she'd gone to bed, I sat alone on the balcony with a cup of tea, store-bought, untouched by anyone else's hands. The night air was cool, quiet but not empty. I thought about the version of myself from a year ago, the woman who smiled to keep the peace, who trusted without question, who didn't know how close she was to losing everything. I didn't blame her. She'd been listening to the wrong silences. Now I listened differently. I listened for hesitation in Ivy's voice, not to stop it, but to understand it. I listened to my own instincts, the ones I'd learned to dismiss. I listened when something felt off, even if I couldn't yet explain why. That, I realized, was the real inheritance my mother had left me. Not the money, not the house, but the ability to see clearly and the courage to act when it mattered. On the anniversary of the day Ivy spoke for the first time, we didn't mark it with pancakes or ceremonies. We did something simpler. We volunteered. A local library had a reading hour for kids who were shy, anxious, or learning English. Ivy sat on the rug with a book in her lap, legs crossed, Echo curled beside her. When it was her turn, she read slowly, clearly, pausing when a younger child asked a question. No rush, no pressure, just space. On the walk home, Ivy slipped her hand into mine. I think voices are like muscles, she said. If you don't use them, they get tired. But if you're forced to use them, they hurt. I considered that. So what's the best way? She smiled. Let them grow when they're ready. That night, Ivy finally asked for her letter. She opened it on her bed, read it silently, then folded it back up. Her eyes were shiny but calm. What did it say? I asked gently. She tucked it under her pillow. That I survived, and that one day I'd help someone else survive too. I reached out and brushed her hair back. You already have. She yawned, the day catching up with her. Good, she murmured. Then it worked. As I turned off the light and closed her door, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. Our story hadn't been about silence or speech, danger or rescue. It had been about listening. And because we had learned how, really learned, we would keep finding our way forward, one honest word, one brave pause, and one shared moment at a time.